Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about linking circuits, behaviors, and symptoms. I want to go forth with the question, Garima, that what are the most convincing examples where neural circuits map onto behavior or psychiatric symptoms? So, can you give us a very detailed account on that?
Okay. So when we talk about convincing examples, fear, anxiety, and reward circuits usually come up first. And the main reason for that is pretty straightforward. These behaviors are fairly conserved across species, across animals and humans. Threat detection, avoidance, and reward seeking serve very basic survival functions. So, when we study these behaviors, we are often looking at systems that evolution hasn't changed drastically. In fear and anxiety, research specifically, like circuits involving the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and the hippocampus, have been mapped quite clearly to threat detection, fear learning, and regulation. What's interesting is that when these circuits are disrupted, the behavioral changes aren't subtle. You see exaggerated fear responses, difficulty extinguishing learned fear, or inappropriate fear in safe context. That is, when there is no existence of fear. And these matters clinically because many anxiety related symptoms look exactly like failures in these processes. It's not that fear exists, it's that it doesn't switch off when it should. What really strengthens these examples is consistency. Similar patterns show up in animal studies, in human imaging work, and in clinical observations. When different approaches point to the same circuit behavior relationships, we can be more confident that we are not just looking at a specific lab effect. Reward and motivation circuits are another strong case. Like dopamine related pathways have been linked to motivation, reinforcement, and habit formation. When these circuits are altered, you don't just see vague behavioral changes. You see specific shifts in persistence, in how effort is valued, or in compulsive patterns of behavior. So overall, the most convincing examples tends to be the ones where behavior is measurable, repeatable, and clearly tied to circuit activity, not just in one experiment but across multiple level of evidence.
Right. So, coming to the second question, I wanted to ask how do optogenetics, chemogenetics, and imaging affect such, casual claims?
Okay. So tools like optogenetics and chemogenetics have really changed how we talk about causality in neuroscience. They allow us to move beyond correlation. Instead of just observing which circuits are active, we can ask what happens when we selectively change activity in a specific pathway. That's a major shift because for a long time we could say a circuit was involved, but not whether it was actually driving behavior. At the same time, these tools can sometimes give a false sense of certainty. The manipulations are extremely precise, sometimes more precise than real life. And behavior outside the lab is shaped by history, context, and internal state. Imaging adds another important layer, especially in humans where we can't directly manipulate circuits. But at the same time, imaging alone can't tell us whether a circuit is causing a behavior or simply responding to it. So the strongest causal claims come from convergence when manipulation, studies, imaging results, and behavioral outcomes all point in the same direction.
Right. So, what limit translation from animal circuits finding to humans? Like essentially what we want to do or what labs generally do is to try to replicate their findings on animal models, and oftentimes it is not applicable in that of humans. So, can you talk about the limitations here?
Yeah, there are number of limitations that makes it difficult for the translation of animal circuit findings to human. But in my opinion, one major limitation is how behavior is defined and measured. Like animal tasks are often simplified to isolate specific variables. That's incredibly useful experimentally, but human symptoms don't appear in neat trials. Human behavior is shaped by context, by past experience, and by social experiment. And those factors are hard to fully capture in the lab. And second challenge is subjectivity. Like anxiety, motivation, or low mood aren't just observable actions. They are lived experiences of people or human or animal. So even when circuits look similar across species, their functional role can still differ depending on cognitive demands and social meaning. Because of that, translational works best. Translation works best when animal findings are treated as guides, not as direct explanations of human symptoms. So, in my opinion, these are the two major challenges. The first one being how the behavior is defined and measured, and the second one being the subjectivity.
Right. So you eventually want to go for PhD. So as a PhD student, how do you think students balance circuit mechanisms with ecologically valid behavior?
Okay, for PhD student, I think this balance really starts with the question itself. If the question is grounded in real behavior, like something that actually matters outside the lab, it becomes much easier to choose the right tools and model. We know what the question is, then accordingly we can choose what are the tools and models that would be used to answer that specific question. And second thing is mechanistic circuit work is important, but it doesn't have to come at the cost of realism. Even small design choices like using behaviors that resemble natural decision making or stress response people actually experience can make a project more relevant. What really matters is being clear about what your model captures and what it doesn't. That kind of clarity shows maturity. It shows you're not just interested in how circuits work in isolation, but in why that knowledge matters in the real world. So, in my opinion, the balance is is all about the question itself. What question you're asking and what you want to discover that
Right.
might help society.
Right, Garima. Thank you so much for your insightful thoughts and knowledge. And that brings us to the end of the episode. So, thank you for joining us. And thank you, listeners, for listening to our podcast.